kind of going to share with y'all tonight on some of the things that some of the research that we fund, work with, stuff behind the scenes. It's not always right here on Lake Bistineau, but it's things we use here. It's things that have been going on for a lot of years with a lot of our partners that we work with. And so some very valuable research. I'm going to have some folks come share with you, and I'll introduce them at that time as well. We've got lots of some folks here I want to kind of recognize and stuff. I know we've got Representative Dodie Horton is here. I think we have some folks from Senator Gaddy's office, and maybe also from Representative McMahon. I'm stumbling on that. And Colin said they were going to come. We also got a lot of our local police jurors here, so all throughout the room. So we've got staff here tonight with our department. Of course, Secretary Jack Montoucet is here. Assistant Secretary Patrick Banks. Our Inland Fisheries Director, Ricky Moses, is here. We've got Daniel Hill, who works on our statewide aquatic plant control research. We've got some other of our aquatic biologists that work throughout the state. On Salvinia here, Salvinia on lakes that are very, very similar to Lake Bistineau, so this is a problem that is certainly not unique to Bistineau, but we've got it on a lot of places and working many fronts. So, got lots of things to share, and we'll have time for questions and all that at the end as well. So, before we get into anything else, Secretary Montoucet, if you'd like to come say a few words, please.
Thank you, Jeff. You notice I'm dressed like an enforcement agent. I left my gun in the car. These things would get too hot here. No, it's certainly nice to be up here. I try to spend as much time as I can up here. Love this area, love Lake Bistineau, and I got to tell you, I made a commitment 3 years ago to take Lake Bistineau and kind of put it, really close to me and see what we could do to try to set up a plan of action where we could implement in other parts of the state. Because make no mistake, Lake Bistineau is not by itself when it deals with Salvinia. We have to deal with Salvinia through all over the state. And it's encouraging to me to see that as many people as you, citizens who live around Bistineau or use Bistineau, come out and have an opportunity for us to share with you what we're doing, what we plan on doing, and also get feedback from you so that we can better understand what your concerns are, and hopefully we can address some of those concerns. So without further ado, thank you all for coming out. It's always a pleasure to come up here. I always look forward to it and try to find an excuse to get up here. So this was the perfect one for me to get up here. I heard y'all had some bad weather last night. I'm sorry to hear about that. It's one of those things. Mother Nature has been dealing us some pretty bad deals lately, and I don't have to tell you, as a department, we have spent millions of dollars dealing with what Mother Nature has dealt with. Salvinia is one prime example of that. So thank you all again for coming out. I certainly appreciate the staff here. These guys work really hard to try to do what's the right thing, not only for the taxpayers, but for the habitat and for the lakes and for all of the animals and fish that we have over here, and fortunate to have. So, to them, my hat's off to them. Certainly the most dedicated people in the state, and I'll tell you, it makes my job one of the best jobs in the state, because when you've got good people working for you, all you got to do is get out of the way and let them do their jobs. And so I want to thank them for what they do for our state. So thank you all so much.
All right, our first presenter tonight is Julie Nachtrieb. Julie works for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers out of the Louisville office. She's an entomologist that's been working closely with us since 2012 on Salvinia weevil research. She has spent a lot of time on Lake Bistineau and a lot of other lakes in the area, and she's going to kind of come share some of her research, some of the things that she's been working on, and kind of show you what has come out of those years of study. So, Julie. Yeah, we're going to have to come turn it in.
There we go. Okay, so like like Jeff said, my name is Julie Nachtrieb, and I work for the Corp of Engineers. And let's see if I can get this to go through. There we go. So I've been working with Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries since 2012. We have a partnership between the Corps and Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries where they fund me to help them out with some of their biocontrol work over here. So we conduct the Salvinia weevil rearing, release, and monitoring for a large portion of the state. And this is our facility in Louisville, Texas. We're a little north of Dallas. So I thought just in case y'all had never seen a presentation before where anybody really gave you a little brief introduction into the Salvinia weevils that we use for biocontrol, I thought I'd give you a few pointers here. So the Salvinia weevil is really tiny. It's about the size of a fire ant. You can see it here, on the hairs of Salvinia. It's completely host specific, so it can only feed on Salvinia. It can only complete its life cycle on Salvinia. So if Salvinia is eliminated, the weevil will no longer be present either. The adult stage of the weevils feed on the buds and leaves of Salvinia, which helps to suppress the growth. And then the larval stage, this little small guy right here, tunnels in the rhizome of the plant. And the rhizome is basically like if you think of grass having a runner, produces a runner and then produces more leaves. That's basically what Salvinia does. It has this rhizome that connects multiple plants together. And so the larval stage tunnels in that rhizome and disrupts the nutrient flow and is actually the life stage that kills the plant. So from the beginning of doing biocontrol with the Salvinia weevil, researchers from way back in the 1980s when this first began were very concerned with the overwintering or temperature tolerance of this insect. So the insect and the plant are both from South America, it's tropical, and so the insect has not evolved to have a mechanism for overwintering. It doesn't really have a way to hibernate. So they did a bunch of laboratory studies in the beginning to test what different water temperatures this insect could survive in. So they found that in water temperatures of 66 to 70 degrees, that there was very little egg laying. If you got less than 66 degrees, eggs would not hatch. At less than 63 degrees, no larvae can survive, and this is water temperatures. We did a study a few years ago, so this last citation here is something that I actually did with Wildlife and Fisheries. We had Lake Iac, which I believe is kind of in central Louisiana, where the weevils overwintered on this lake, and we were able to detect a little bit lower temperature here, at temperatures ranging from 58 to 63 degrees. We saw weevil mating, egg laying, egg hatch, and larval survival. So we saw a little bit lower temperature ranges here in a real world situation where the temperatures are fluctuating. So I've worked on Bistineau with Wildlife and Fisheries for 6 years, from 2012 to 2017. And this is a map of the 4 different sites that we worked on across Bistineau. And so I'm going to try to summarize as quickly as possible all 6 years of what we did on Bistineau. And in order to kind of give you a comparison and to put it in perspective, I'm going to compare the data that we collected on Bistineau with data that we collected on Caddo. And those will be our 2 northern water bodies that are in very close proximity. And then we're going to compare those northern water bodies to about the farthest south that I went during that time period, which was Blind River near Baton Rouge. So you can kind of get the perspective of the differences we saw from northern to southern sites. So our first year on Bistineau was 2012, and we released 30,000 weevils at Bird Island. But by late summer, the site was inaccessible due to the annual water level drawdown that's very common on Bistineau as a plant management technique. So we kind of learned our lesson that year and realized that we were going to have to move to deeper waters. And usually when we do Salvinia work, it's typical that we try to go back as far in the woods as possible, areas where the spray boats can't get, because we feel like that's where the weevils are going to be more help for us, because the boats can't get in there. So usually we're in shaded areas. But at Bistineau, because of the water level drawdowns, we had to move out into kind of more of like a main channel of the lake with deeper water and less trees, so that we would be able to get to our sites, and the sites would remain with water year-round. So we didn't really get much data that year. So the second year was 2013, and we moved to a new site. We moved to Crow's Foot, and we released 100,000 Salvinia weevils between April through October. So when you look at this graph here, here's every time we sampled, and we usually sampled about once a month. And when I say that we released from April through October, we split up that 100,000 weevils into multiple releases. So basically, every time we would come out, we would collect plants to look for weevils, and we would release more weevils. So what you would expect to see is that as you're releasing more and more weevils, you would see this weevil population growing through the growing season. So at Bistineau, we saw that we got a decent amount of weevils by August. But then when we came back in October, there had been an 80% reduction in the weevil population. So at this time, we really didn't know if this was a fluke, if maybe, The plants had distributed and floated off with the weevils. Why were we not finding our weevils in October? So we released again. We found a little bit that the population was coming back in November, but then at the onset of winter, which originally was our main concern, was how the weevils were going to survive during winter, we saw an 80%, so I think I misspoke earlier, but the August to October was actually a 90% or 96% reduction. The winter reduction from November to December was an 80% reduction in our weevil populations. So we spent all this time releasing 100,000 weevils, and we were hit twice with huge reductions on this lake. So by the time we get to February of the next year, we didn't find any weevils, so there were no signs that the weevils had successfully overwintered on this lake. But while I'm only talking about Bistineau and Caddo and Blind River, we had sites all over north, central, and southern Louisiana that we released at maybe more like 10 water bodies or something in total. So we detected no adults in February of 2014 at any of the northern or central sites. So there was absolutely no successful overwintering during that year. So in comparison, here's the Caddo data. So where we released 100,000 weevils at Bistineau, we only released 50,000 at Caddo, and we did it for a shorter time period, only April through June. And at Caddo, we basically saw what we would have expected to see. We're out here releasing, it's the growing season, the weevils are mating, and we see this nice increase in the weevil densities. We saw a slight drop here at the hottest part of summer, but nothing too bad, not as much as the 96% reduction at Bistineau. And we saw another peak here when it started to get a little bit cooler and the weevils started mating more. But we actually, at the onset of winter from November to December at Caddo, saw 100% reduction. So by early December, or mid-December, we detected 0 weevils on Caddo. And then if you're wondering why I have this huge, axis here going up to 1,200 weevils, that's to try to put in perspective that at Bistineau, all of our numbers were at less than 100. At Caddo, we had about 3 times more weevils detected, got into the 300 range. But at our southern site, you can see how many more weevils we saw during this year at the southern site. So we only released 16,000 weevils. So 100,000 Bistineau, 50,000 Caddo, only 16,000 at this southern site, and a one-time release in September. So very late in the season, and by November, we were detecting these just astronomical levels of weevils. So the orange bars here are the adults. So almost 900 adults per square meter of Salvinia. We did see a reduction at the beginning of winter, but it was only a 50% reduction, where at Bistineau and Caddo, we saw an 80% and 100% reduction. And it did reduce further down as we got into early spring, but we did detect the weevils at decent levels for all of February, and so this site had successful overwintering. So this chart right here is just trying to find a simple way to explain that we saw the same trend. So I just talked about year 2013. But in 2014 and 2015, we saw the exact same trends as what we saw in 2012. We released 100,000 at Caddo, 150,000 at Bistineau, and only 17,000 at Blind River. Blind River and Caddo basically behaved the way we would expect. The weevil densities peaked in December at over 100 weevils per kilogram. We would expect to have late season peaks because you're expecting that until it gets cold, the weevils are reproducing and growing their population levels. But at Bistineau, even though we released the most weevils here and had the most extensive release time frame of May through October, we only got a peak of 55 adults in August, and then following August, during this very warm time period, a 96% reduction. The same thing we go into year 4, a 99% reduction. So by the time we saw this 3 years in a row, we decided this isn't a fluke. Not only is winter a problem on Bistineau, there's something going on during this the warm weather. We also, on 2015, on this 4th year, we increased the sites at Bistineau to 3 sites to try to give us a better chance to detect and figure out what was going on. And also, as kind of a fail-safe to make sure that this wasn't a fluke, we caged off all the sites of Bistineau, because Bistineau has a lot of water flow. So we would go back and you can actively see the plants floating around. The weevils are in the plants. So feasibly, it could be that we're going back to our sites and sampling, and the plants and weevils have floated off. So we caged off all the sites of Bistineau, and that's why these release levels are less this year, because we made cages are only 2 square meters. They were pretty small, and we didn't want to put 100,000 weevils into such a small area. So even when we caged them off like this, we still saw the same thing, that summer was just, the populations were basically reducing to 0. Also, I just want to point out that at Bistineau and Caddo, for all 3 years here at Bistineau, there was no successful overwintering. Caddo, we did overwinter a slight amount of weevils in the winter of 2015, 2016, but not really enough that it would be able to really restart the population on its own. You'd still have to do more releases. But at Blind River, the southern site, the weevils successfully overwintered every single year. And in fact, by the third year, we decided we didn't even need to release weevils at this site. Since it was doing so great, we were having such high peaks, that we would basically just sit back and see what the weevils would do on their own. So there were no releases here. And we did find a peak of less weevils that year, but this is still very high numbers. I mean, at some of the sites that I sample in Texas where the weevils successfully overwinter, somewhere between 20 to 30 weevils per kilogram is a decent level. So to find 60 is very high. So for the 5th year of Bistineau, so we're having all these problems. We're now overwintering, and now at this point think that there's something going on where the water is getting too hot during summer. So for year 5 in 2016, at all of our sites from northern to southern Louisiana, we installed containment booms as another fail-safe to make sure the plants are not floating away, so we could have accurate data. So we installed these containment booms, and these are pictures of 2 of our booms at Bistineau. And we installed water temperature probes at all of our sites. And we decided to read the water temperature just in that first half of just like maybe the top 4 inches. So you've got your Salvinia all fluffy on top of the surface, and then the roots of the Salvinia hanging in the first couple of inches. And that's the weevil habitat. The weevil is only going to live as far as it can crawl on those roots. So we took basically surface water temperature readings. So these graphs are kind of messy with the temperature, and it's going to show every site that we sampled across the lake. So this graph starts in April, ends in July 20th. Bistineau is this orange line here. So you can see that by far, once we got into the June to July time period, that the water temperatures at Bistineau were substantially higher than every other site. And this was actually statistically significantly higher. And we got into 91 degrees. And that's pretty amazing because that is the average of all the hourly water temperature readings for an entire month. So that means the temperatures were getting higher than that and also lower than that to come out with an average of 91 degrees. We also know from past research that other biologists have conducted that once you get above this black line here, there is no egg laying. And I would suspect at Bistineau also the larvae were not surviving. I couldn't find any citations saying what the warm temperature limit was of the weevils, but all of our data is showing that they're not surviving in these hot conditions. So this graph ended in July. And here it is just continuing on. So Bistineau is now in its 2nd straight month of average water temperatures being above 90 degrees in that top portion of the water underneath Salvinia. And this is our data from that year, 2016, the 5th year for Bistineau, and you can see all 3 of our sites here. We released almost 50,000 weevils per site from April through October, and we started to see, decent weevil increases in the population, and then we get into this warm season, and it just plummets off again, where we have almost no weevils. We built up a little bit more here from a weevil release that we conducted in September and October. And then when we went into the beginning of winter, we actually had pretty much the highest population that we've had. All the other years, it was really hard to detect overwintering because we had such little establishment even during the growing season at Bistineau, so we really couldn't even almost detect if they overwintered or not because there were so few. And I just want to point out that all of this data is at 50 weevils per kilogram or less. And when we look at the Caddo data, you can see how much higher during the same year. We only released 30,000 weevils at Caddo. But Caddo, we're in the shade, we're not having these issues with hot water. And so Caddo is doing really well, and Caddo peaked at really good densities basically from May to December of that year. And this is really more of where you want to be. You want to go into winter, which should be the hardest and toughest season for these weevils to survive. So you want as many weevils as possible when you head into winter. So this data is showing every lake we sampled during the winter of 2016-2017. The circled ones, these are our 3 sites on Bistineau. So you can see that going into winter, in early December, that Bistineau had by far the least amount of weevils established at that point. These are the Caddo sites, so Caddo was doing great that year. So we go into January and into March, and this was really the first year, so this is year 5, and this is the first year that we had substantial overwintering success at every one of our sites in northern and central Louisiana. So, it's a big deal when you've spent that many years and you finally get overwintering success, but this also shows how inconsistent it is when you don't know if you're going to have a harsh winter or not and if the weevils are going to survive. So for the 6th year, this is the year following the successful overwintering, at Caddo and Turkey Creek, the weevils overwintered so well that we decided we weren't even going to release weevils at those lakes that year. We were going to see how the populations could grow on their own. And we had really good results that year, and we actually saw reductions in Giant Salvinia biomass and surface coverage. But I want to point out that while this was highly successful for our project, we were really excited that this was very localized. So we've got those big booms, and we had 3 of them on Turkey Creek and 2 of them on Caddo. And we did see reductions in the Salvinia infestation at those localized release sites, but there wasn't really time for the weevils to have spread all over the lake, and they didn't really have the ability to impact the Salvinia after just 1 year. So you're going to have multiple years to let them spread. So for the 6th and final year that we worked on this biocontrol in Bistineau, we decided to move one of our booms into a shade site, even though with the water drawdown we might lose access, so that we could test the ability of the weevil to establish during the growing season if it was in the shade. So here's another crazy temperature graph of all of our sites. This red line up here, so this is our Bistineau site that was still in the sun. So you can see it is by far the warmest site, even compared to our southern sites. This blue dot that's in here grouped with everybody else, this is our Bistineau site that we moved into the shade. So it's pretty obvious here that being out in the full sun was inhibiting the weevils from establishing. And just to real quick show you the data that year, we went ahead and released 50,000 more weevils per site at Bistineau. And we saw this really nice increase until we got into the warm part of the season, and from July to August, we saw this substantial reduction in the site that was in sun. The site that was in shade reduced a little bit, but not as much as the site in the sun was impacted. And then back when you get into kind of the cooler weather in fall, the weevils are able to reproduce again in the cooler weather. So just to summarize all of this, I just kind of want to talk about how do we define success when we're initiating a new biocontrol project. So really the first thing that we look for is if we can get the insects, if we can release the insects and see a population growth and expansion. And the first thing you're going to look for is short term, just in one growing season. So at Caddo and Blind River, every single growing season, we saw a significant increase from our weevil releases. At Bistineau, we only saw this one time out of the 6 years, and that was only at the site that was moved into the shade. And then so our next step after you get weevils established short term would be long term, where they're living on their own at the site for multiple growing seasons. They are successfully overwintering. So at Blind River, our southern site, every single year of this project, they overwintered. At Caddo, only 2 out of 6 years, and the 1 year was very, very minimal. But the second year, it was enough that we didn't release weevils the next year. And at Bistineau, only 1 year. So really, at Bistineau, we got nowhere near our next stage, which would be looking for decreases in plant health. So just in summary, weevil overwintering is very inconsistent in northern Louisiana. And in order to have successful management of Giant Salvinia infestations, we're going to need sustained weevil establishment for multiple years. Just 1 year overwintering is not going to be enough, and probably even just 2 years overwintering. You're really going to have to just have perpetual mild winters to get the weevil populations high enough to impact anything. And I just want to point out again that that 1 year that we did have successful overwintering, those results were exciting, but they were really small scale, localized just to our release sites. So we need to have sustained weevils, to have broad scale management, and really our solution here, if we want to continue biocontrol in northern Louisiana, is a more cold tolerant ecotype of the Salvinia weevil. And that's what Rodrigo is going to talk about. That's it. Y'all want to see like 10 more graphs real quick?
Julie, may I ask you a question? Since they hate the hot weather, how is it in the tropical places? How hot does their water get?
You know, I'm not sure because I haven't
don't
really
understand that.
Yeah, and I haven't seen any papers really out there. I don't know if you have, Rodrigo, that are concerned with the high temperature limits of the weevil. And I'm not sure yet if this is just a problem on Bistineau. We have some sites, we've expanded our sites in southern Louisiana this year, and we're putting water temperature probes out there. So I'm going to kind of look at that when some of those sites are in full sun to see, how, if this is going to be a problem that we're going to have to, start concerning ourselves with. The weevils are nocturnal, so, we do know that they prefer to mate and feed, at night or in early morning. But I don't know, we were talking about on the boat that we don't know if they'll, self-regulate and maybe go out into the full sun to feed and then move back into the shade? I mean,
It's crazy.
yeah.
One of the, I don't know for sure, but in looking at the established sites in the literature where the weevil has had success, in the tropics, the temperatures are more consistent year round. They may be hot, but there's not, our summers are way here and our winters are way here, but it's just a much more consistent temperature range, and it may have something to do with that. I mean, there's a lot of questions to answer in this kind of research. As you can see from that, you're trying to solve one and it leads to another question and to another and to another, and not everything is certainly understood by it.
And the water is definitely hotter underneath the mat. If you drive your boat a little bit further away to open water that's in full sun, it's not going to be as hot as under that blanket of salvinia that's just collecting all that heat from the sun. So it's almost like it's like putting a cover on your pool or something, and heating up the water.
Julie, on the Caddo site, y'all eventually saw some overwintering and all that on the graph. It was, I think, about 2 degrees Celsius, 4.5 degrees Fahrenheit cooler. Were those weevils in the shade at Caddo, or were they in full sun?
Yes, they're at most of our sites. They're in the shade because we try to go as far in the trees as possible. Bistineau was kind of the oddball that was the full sun site because we were trying to get out into deeper water. But yeah, and then we talked about over the years that really, if we could ever get them to establish at Bistineau in the full sun, we really kind of think they might have a better chance of overwintering because those sites might be warmer during winter. But it wouldn't be sustainable. Anything else? Thanks.
Thank you, Julie. Our next presenter is Dr. Rodrigo Diaz. He is with LSU Ag Center out of Baton Rouge, and he's an entomologist, professor. Been working directly with our department since 2015, kind of a continuation of a research project that the department's been funding since, I think, 2005. Does that sound about right, somewhere in there? So he's got some information to present on some of the work we're trying to work with on solving that problem. Can we get a cold tolerant weevil? So he's going to kind of come share some of that. We just got to get past those inconsistencies to have any luck with getting that. So
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I think
Awesome. Yes. Can you turn on the light? Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Rodrigo Diaz. I work for the Department of Entomology at LSU. And I like the presentation of Julie because it gives us a really awesome background on what we're going to be talking about, which is these thermal issues. We're going to be talking about temperature. And Julie did a great job putting all of these in perspective. I would like to recognize the co-authors of this presentation that are mostly will be my students that actually did the hard work. That will be Alana, Lori, and Rachel right now. And also I would like to recognize the cooperation by Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries that are always providing feedback also about what they are observing in the field will help us tremendously running these experiments. All right, let's talk about the weevil and temperature. So I would like to show you what is happening in the southern of Louisiana because for me it shows, what is the ideal conditions of this thing and how we can try to simulate somewhat here in these northern areas. So here is a picture. This is in Cameron Parish, June, beautiful Salvinia. And what is happening already in that Salvinia, we have hundreds of weevils almost everywhere in that pond. By July, you have that black Salvinia. August is already sinking. You can already see right here those open water. And by August, let me see if I click one more. By September, you have the pond is clear. Now, this is for me is outstanding. When I came to Louisiana and I saw this thing occurring naturally, it's just mind-blowing to think that all those tons and tons of Salvinia can go from that in June to this. But again, let's put this thing in perspective. Imagine here in June, you do have weevils everywhere, not only in high densities, but actually in the locations, they are everywhere. This is just to show you some numbers. So similar as Julie, here we have the number of weevils per kilo of Salvinia, and here we have the different months that we sampled. But take a look at this. In June, in southern Louisiana, we already have an average of 40 weevils per kilo with a huge range up to 100 weevils per kilo. So if you go back to that picture in June, you have weevils everywhere. So again, it's not only the high density, but especially they are already everywhere throughout the pond. So this is something that we think in terms of how to achieve control. So when we're talking about these, high densities and temperature, we need to think, well, how I have weevils everywhere in those plants and in high density. So this is something that is going to be about a numbers game, we can call it, all right? Now, again, this is a story in southern Louisiana. Okay. Yes. So part of our job, that thanks to Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries, we're being funded, is to look for alternatives, how we can improve the job of the weevil here in these northern areas where we're facing some of these extreme conditions. As Jeff mentioned it very clearly, here in these areas of Louisiana, we have colder winters and hotter summers. So the thermal variation is huge here compared with these areas in the southern locations with this range is definitely shorter. So that's also something to think, that the weevil has some type of a harder time just because of this climate extreme that we're facing in these areas, right? And I always mention this picture from Jeff about, I think it was from 2014, just this frozen cake of Salvinia. And when you think about it, it's really hard to come up with a weevil that can survive such extreme events. This doesn't happen every year, but when it happens, it can easily knock down not only the Salvinia, but of course the weevils that are going to sink when this plant is destroyed. Okay, so it's a sad face for the weevil, obviously it's not doing as well. And this picture, for me, is also amazing, again from Jeff, just to see Salvinia, the lake is frozen, the water is solid, and then you have the Salvinia here in these cracks. And when you think about it, most of these probably happened in 2018, also 2014, Jeff mentioned probably 2009. These extreme weather events, you can think about this destruction of the population of everything, the Salvinia and the weevil, but it's just those very few plants that probably remain on the cracks of these plants, those trees, that eventually is going to give you the problem rapidly in the following year. 2018 was a great example. You saw the winter. I was talking with Jeff and also the folks at Cross Lake. It was a fantastic year because of the low biomass of Salvinia in many of those locations. But again, when we put this operation of the weevil in perspective, we have to think how we need to be restocking these weevils thanks to different rearing operations that Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries is managing to be able to recover them. So the weevil is always in contact with Salvinia after these extreme events. Now, this is data from Cross Lake, thanks to Bobby Johnson, who manages the lake. He was able to share with me this information. So what you have here is the weevils per kilo in his samples. Here is the time of the year. Here is data from January 2017 all the way to February 2018. Similar as Julie presented this story. We have a mild winter between 16 and 17 right here. Nice numbers of weevils. They were able to sustain, increase, maintain during the summer. And just chatting with Bobby, he had a decent level of damage on the plant and some reduction of the mat thickness in Cross Lake over the fall of 2017. As Julie mentioned, awesome increases in numbers leading towards the winter, and then, as you can see here, 2018 winter came, hard freezes, all those numbers crashed back to zero. But 2018, of course, was a nice year for Salvinia, was at low levels of densities and biomass. But this just shows, how we need to maintain these rearing operations in order to restock the weevils as these extreme events are becoming more common, let's say. And that, as a scientist, is quite interesting because as we read the climate change predictions, these extreme events is not only the climate is warming, but actually the winters like having these harsh extreme events, as you know, these cold fronts are getting colder, and these heat waves are going to be harder. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about management action. So very interesting story from Cross Lake. So in terms of what we have been trying to do to improve biocontrol in these areas, my laboratory have been trying different approaches. And one of them, I have one graduate student, Ali Kosa, that she worked for the Red River. So what she decided to do is like, well, we have been releasing this weevil through central and north Louisiana. Why not we go back to those areas and trying to find locations where we may have some naturally occurring cold tolerance? Okay, so she went to Homa, our southern location, central Louisiana, and then she went to Bayou Nicolas. So Bayou Nicolas is right there, that is Shreveport, Monroe, so right here. So she found some weevils in this location, brought it back to the lab, and started comparing the cold tolerance with these other populations. And what she found out is that Bayou Nicolas weevils had definitely greater tolerance when they were exposed to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, freezing conditions, right? So that's well, for me it's something exciting to say, well, maybe this cold tolerance is occurring naturally in some of these locations. So when she published this information, actually, that came out, actually, I think is this year, in this publication, 2019, she suggested, well, while we're exploring these populations from Argentina, maybe we can start exploring some local populations that have already given us some of these cold tolerance that we haven't talked. Okay, so this is the data from Ali Cruz. Now we're going to talk about the Argentinian population that, again, we have been working for several years. The story is very simple. The weevil originally that we have in Louisiana comes from Brazil. It's a tropical country, more or less in this location. The temperature is doesn't match as well to what we have in temperate Louisiana. So let's go farther south where the winters match better to what we have here in Louisiana. Okay, so that was the reasoning to go in there. So we established a collaboration. We traveled to Argentina already 2 times to bring these weevils. Something very important in this project has been that we will make sure that we have the same species that we know that only attacks Giant Salvinia, and we have been working with the Department of Agriculture to help us moving along with this permitting process. So we brought this population from Argentina, and then we exposed it to different cold temperatures in the laboratory. So to bring this population, we need to go through several steps. I cannot take it from Argentina to Lake Bistineau, I wish, but basically in meantime, we need to run some experiments in the laboratory, comparing these populations and see, well, how good does the Argentinian population compare to what we have in Louisiana. So when you put it next to each other, this is some data, when you put it at 0 degrees centigrade, the Henderson population takes longer to recover versus the Argentinian. They warm up and they start moving faster compared with the Louisiana population. So this is kind of a behavior variable. When you start talking about survival, when you put these weevils at freezing conditions, 0 degrees centigrade, this is the population, when you put in several hours, and this is the number of weevils that are dying. The longer you put the weevils at freezing conditions, the more weevils they die. Now, when you compare the Louisiana versus the Argentinian populations, basically, the survival of the Argentinian is greater. They handle better freezing conditions. But remember, freezing is 0 degrees centigrade, which of course that in Fahrenheit is different, but this doesn't mean that the weevil, if you put this weevil at, let's say, 20 degrees, most likely it's going to die. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, is that how cold is going to survive this weevil. They are not cold resistant, meaning that nothing, there is some, for example, some insects from Canada that they build a protection inside, like they accumulate fat, and they can handle -20. You think about, those freezing conditions that are experienced in Canada. These weevils, they don't have these adaptations. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of, how cold they can last. And we do know that we have some, at least air temperatures that will go below 20. Okay, so, and this is basically just showing that, as we build the case for this Argentinian population, I need to show the US government that these are the reasons why these populations should be released in Louisiana to help with the problem. So we build this information, and now to release this population, we need to go through several processes. The information in the lab is there. We know that it's different than Louisiana, and it's going to have to have some cold adaptations. Now, what the government is asking also is that we need to conduct some basically, make sure that the insect that I have from Argentina only is going to feed on Giant Salvinia. So we are already doing some of that. Seems to me that the government is becoming more picky about this, like they want to do a whole range testing. That is the latest that I'm hearing from them. So that is taking some time. The other thing that we're building right now in Baton Rouge is basically we have this population in the quarantine in Baton Rouge, and we're increasing in numbers. To make it to the level of production, I need to make sure that I have thousands of weevils in order for them to be moved to a rearing operation. Now, so this is where we are in terms of the timeline. By the summer of 2019, we're going to request a permit of release to the USDA APHIS. And if everything goes well and they accept the information that we're providing, we suspect that maybe in spring 2020, we may have a population available. Now, this timeline is critical. My bosses are here and they tell me that I need to push this hard. And we're working really hard to make that happen. We will need some support from perhaps from our stakeholders to move this process through the different, specifically through USDA APHIS, to say that, well, information is there, please accelerate this paperwork. So this is where we are with this information. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit because when we're talking about temperature, something that is, some of my students keep asking, why don't we protect Salvinia during the winter to try to see whether we can have these kind of nurseries of weevils that are protected. So I have Lori Moshman that was very interesting to say, well, we use fabric to protect crops from the cold conditions. So she was very interested in protecting the Salvinia, and she got very nice data that like right there, when you cover the Salvinia, the quality of the Salvinia changes. This, of course, is protected. It doesn't have that freezing damage. And when you start comparing the mortality of the weevil right there, when these are covered, when it's directly exposed to the air, of course you have higher mortality compared with these protected nurseries that she was created. So it was more ideas to say, well, what else we need to be doing, not only relying heavily solely on the weevil, but also coming up with other strategies to improve their survival once they are in the field. The other idea was, as you have seen, Salvinia forms these mats, one on top of each other. As what Julie mentioned already, is as you start building this biomass, as you increase the thickness, you create a nice thermal protection. In this case, in the winter, we can use that as a way to increase the temperature, so at least maybe some layers that are below are not as cold as the ones that are in the top, therefore creating some type of, again, these weevil nurseries. So she evaluated that. We put different densities in these areas, and then she was able to increase the temperature and again, coming up with suggestions about how we can create these small nurseries of weevils, especially during cold winters. And the thing that is happening right now, so just to open this conversation about how we can see these weevils working in some locations. What is happening right now in Vermilion and Cameron Parish, dog hunters and fishermen are going to areas where it's brown Salvinia and taking that Salvinia that is loaded with weevils and moving them to the green Salvinia. So that has been the message that is helping a lot. Is basically the weevils already, because the mild winter that we experience, are already showing in different locations. So rather than putting the weevil in one location and coming back in months to see the impact, we are recommending that we need to go back and start moving that Salvinia to the green Salvinia. In that way, you maximize the spread. Remember that word that we had at the beginning. How we maximize the spread. So this is what is already going on, and I'm glad that some folks are already taking that message. So we're going to do some videos because that message works extremely well, at least in some areas in the south. But thinking here, in the temperate regions, this is another idea that I would like to present and say, well, once we identify these hot spots for weevils that made it during the winter, go early in the season and perhaps take that Salvinia and move it actively to new locations Because the weevil is not the fastest mover, it will take months to move from one location to another unless the Salvinia floats. But in some of these ponds that are closed, especially in the south, this method seems to be working extremely well. And right now we have sinking of Salvinia as of last week occurring in Cameroon. So again, another idea we would like to present. This is my last slide. So in terms of the take-home message, we're working actively in developing this cold-tolerant population. There is something already that we can explore with the bio-Nicolas. Again, I bet if we collect some populations from Cross Lake or maybe Lake Bistineau, there may be something already, as Julie presented with your data of the temperature moving a little bit towards the cold, that may be something already happening. And of course, we're really moving actively to getting the Argentinian population out. Again, we have to understand, what is the survival in these locations. I'm glad that, LDWF with the entire team is monitoring the survival during the spring, because that's going to tell you a lot what is going to happen in the subsequent months. And the only thing is, I'm glad that we're going to have a subsequent presentation is about that we need to develop an integrated management. If I give this presentation in Vermilion Parish and Cameroon, I can tell them, just use the weevil. You don't need to be spraying herbicides, because we recognize the impact. But here, we do need to recognize that this has to be a multi-strategy approach in terms of the weevil can give me this level of damage depending on the winter. For me, control will be control is completely eradication. The pond is clear, or I can survive, with a thinner mat of Salvinia where I just need to do one herbicide application versus 3 over the course of the summer. So this is some of the conversations that we may have to have in terms of, what is, as Julie presented, what is successful control here in the north, what we can expect out of the weevil. And I'm glad that we're going to be talking about chemical control. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Yes.
Yes.
How many weevils does it take to contain 1 acre of Salvinia?
That's the toughest question that I have.
I was told, I think about 5 years ago, it's 800,000 weevils to contain 1 acre.
Yes, that's the hardest question. I don't have the answer. In southern Louisiana, for example, we know that, I can tell you, if by June you have 50 weevils per kilo, hey, I can tell you that maybe in 2 months, maybe less than that, you saw the pictures, I can tell you that you have some control. So in terms of total numbers in an area is hard, but for me it's like, what is the number that you have leading in May and June? I can tell some people in Vermilion that if you have 50 weevils per kilo in May, you don't have to spray. In Vermilion, in May. Exactly. But, so that's kind of the dent that we need to be talking about, densities per kilo.
How do the weevils actually move from one place to another naturally?
Naturally, they fly. We are able to, with Julie, we run one experiment with light traps. And you run the light trap during the night and you catch them. As Julie mentioned, they are active at night and they fly. I don't see them, going in one direction. Maybe they are hoppers and they may have some local dispersal. We don't know for sure, how far they spread, but we know that they fly. But I think, the long distance dispersal is perhaps floating events when you take all that Salvinia going to greater distances.
So if you interject them upstream and they come downstream with the Salvinia as the current brings it down, that's one way to help with the...
Yes. So for us in the south, Red River, we should be putting weevils here. Because all that stuff is going to us rather than south. Exactly. You think, where should we be targeting these efforts at the hotspots of Salvinia? Because eventually the flooding events,
The bar pits.
That's what we say. Go to the bayou door cheap.
okay.
That's where it's coming from.
All right.
Anytime it floods, that's
All that
up in the trees, and as soon as it hits, it comes down, and as soon as they start letting the water down out there, or they start finding a way to go, it goes straight down to Bistineau. You need to start at the very well where it starts at up north, and then work your way down south.
We had weevils established there too, the other part of this. She was early,
We got 1,000 farms in there.
I used to live in
Any other questions? I'm just trying to move along. Yes, go ahead.
You're saying that one day during the winter time, maybe during the summer and spring, we're gonna have these possibly floating incubators that be out, you know, trying to preserve the weevils so they can survive the winter?
Yes, so the idea, yeah, exactly. The reasoning of doing these local nurseries, it was basically rather than, you know, leaving the weevil to the complete exposure to a hard freeze. We say, well, why not in December, we set up these plots, we protect them, we put these covers and we let them to run between December, January, and February. February we still have some issues with cold fronts, and maybe mid-March opening them. So we know that at least you have your source of weevils that were protected. So that was one reasoning of that, is basically that the harder part of the winter, you give them some protection.
Probably some high-tech fabric covering these things.
Exactly. I know that Jeff and also some of my colleagues here at Shreveport, they put pine needles to protect them. You build that insulation. Again, if you have, you know, minus 20, minus 18, it's hard. I mean, that's hard, and that's when we need probably access to nurseries where you have to restock from zero. So it has to be an ongoing effort.
Do the weevils reproduce as fast as hogs do? Because if that's the case, it ought to be over with.
Yeah.
Or as fast as the Salvinia.
Yeah.
I mean, under
that's
ideal
right.
conditions, do weevils multiply faster than Salvinia?
Yeah, I don't think, it's always, you know, Salvinia, and this happened, this was a perfect year to see all of that. In March, New Orleans was calling us, and LDWF were receiving phone calls in March because of the Salvinia took an advantage. It was an explosion in March. The weevils were following behind, and by now, they are already catching up. So usually, I think you are correct. Salvinia may be growing faster. Maybe in March they start growing, but the weevil is following behind, at least in the south. And then by now they are, again, we have sinking of Salvinia as 10 days ago. So it's just the numbers game, you know, where Salvinia is and where the weevils are, and how you try to match those things. It's a numbers game, I guess.
It's the complicated part of it is the weevils have to be on the plant long enough to reach those levels that are high enough to kill it. Just having a few on them, they're not devouring it. It's more like a parasite. There's a high enough damage that the plant can't take the stress of having all those larvae eating through it and these things. And so Julie's graphs, without having that relative number of how many does it take per acre, is, I don't want to say misleading, but to the eyes, it's a curve. So what we did with Julie's work on that is inside those booms, we saw on those really good years on cattle, we saw a reduction in the Salvinia, and it reduced, say, 90%, fell out, and then cycles back around. So it doesn't necessarily, or it hadn't cleared out, but that's a little bit slightly larger scale. We had some weevils that got outside the boom on those mild winter years. You could find them out there, but you weren't really seeing the impacts to the thriving Salvinia around. So the thing about all these things, and this is how you have to start science, is at this level that we're talking about. You take things, Daniel's going to share some stuff in a minute. In the lab, if it doesn't work at a small scale, it's not going to work on a big scale. And not everything that works small scale works bigger scale. So you start there and you work through these ideas. And so that's kind of the hurdle with Salvinia is always its growth rate and then the size of spaces that we're dealing with. 17,000 acres on Bistineau and things like that. So some things show promise and you have to test them and work through them. They're not always easy answers. So that's kind of the process that we're working through. And it's always funny when we talk, when you talk with entomologists, because they always talk about how good the Salvinia looks. That makes I worry about it. It kind of makes us cringe. So Daniel's going to show you what good Salvinia looks like, which is dead Salvinia. You know? So anyway, it's just kind of a, yes, for the weevils to do well, the Salvinia has to do well, and there is a lag time, and there is things like that. And so some of these hold some promise. We got to run it through the ringer still, and hopefully we got something coming. Our next presenter is Daniel Hill, who is our statewide aquatic plant control biologist. manager. And he is presenting some information tonight for Dr. Chris Mudge. Dr. Mudge works employed by the U.S. Army Corp of Engineers, and he's also an adjunct professor at LSU Ag Center in Baton Rouge. He's a weed scientist, and we've been working very closely with Dr. Mudge since 2009. Alex Perret, who followed with Daniel Hill, worked with Dr. Mudge and all sorts of stuff, and he's got some information. He runs through stuff, so Daniel's got some of his information. Dr. Mudge could not be here tonight. And so, anyway, Daniel's going to kind of present some of his stuff and talk about what we're working on herbicide related. Testing what's out there, looking for new things, evaluating what we have currently. So, Daniel's going to come share some of that information.
All right, like Jeff said, I'm Daniel Hill, excuse me. This is Dr. Mudge's research. We work directly with him. We've worked with him for years. It's kind of a think tank. It's, hey, I heard about this herbicide. Hey, I heard about this surfactant. Let's put it to a test. The way things work with Dr. Mudge is he's got a place at the LSU Ag Center in Baton Rouge, and he runs mesocosm studies. Mesocosm is just, it's a small study, small scale. He's got several hundred garbage cans. Basically, it's 30-gallon garbage cans that we fill with Giant Salvinia, and we try different mixtures of this, different mixtures of that, to see what's out there, to see what can work. We present him with different problems. Hey, we have a Giant Salvinia population in a forest. We can't get to all of it. What can we do? What can we try? Can we try something through the sky? Can we try something during the winter? Can we get ahead of it during the winter with herbicides? Different things like that. So it's kind of a think tank, bounce ideas off of, little small mesocosm studies, things like that, that help lead us to larger scale in the field projects like Jeff was talking about. So one of the questions that we ran into was plant control in the winter. The plant slows down, and we get ahead of it with some herbicide. So he started looking at this a few years ago. Plants slow down, all plants slow down in the winter. What can we do? We have 15 herbicides in aquatics that are approved that we can use. Which of these can we use during the winter? So we have two different types out there. We have systemic and we have contact. Systemic gets into the plant, moves around, it'll stop different things, proteins, things like that. Contact is exactly what it sounds like. It is a herbicide that will touch a plant, it touches a plant cell, it kills the plant cell. So we'll try different herbicides, different things like that. But we try something new just about every winter, just to play around. For this study, we tried sorry about this. We tried different mixtures. We tried our usual mixture that we use for spring, summer, fall. We tried contacts. We tried different surfactants, all kinds of good stuff. This is the trial that we tried last time, Glyphosate diclot. That's what we use on a day-to-day basis. Different surfactants, MBOs, and IOSs, systemics, contacts, all different kinds of herbicides. For this experiment, it started in 2014. Think of it as three different winters, all right? We had a real severe winter, 2014, 2015. 15, 16, it was a mild winter. Think of it as mild. And then think of step 3 as pretty much a non-existent winter. We use covers, things like that to protect the plants, to basically protect them like a greenhouse. And what we saw, WAT, week after treatment. So we'll treat, week 0, 1 week after treatment, this is what we're seeing. This is our control, so that means nothing used. This is just basically Mother Nature right here. Second, glyphosate diclot with 2 surfactants. A surfactant is, a lot of people refer to them as soaps. You don't put soap in there. Yeah, we use a soap. Soap just helps the herbicide bind to the plant. It helps get in the hair. Everybody knows the hairs with Giant Salvinia, little egg beaters. The soaps help the herbicide get into the plant. So this is what we saw with glyphosate diclot. Systemic contact. Plants doing all right. 2 weeks after, we got some kill. You know, we hurt them, we injured, we knocked some out. Just the contact diclot, and this is actually our current winter mixture right here. That did pretty good. Did pretty good. This is only 7 weeks out, so you know it knocked it down. It definitely knocked it back. One thing that we learned from this winter, the severe winter, 2014-2015, is if there's an uncovered and a good winter, just about anything works, whether it be systemic, whether it be contact. If you got a good winter and you get a little bit of herbicide on it, the plants are done. That was one thing that we learned, but that's a severe winter. This is Louisiana. We don't know if we're going to have a severe winter. We might have one. We might not have one for 5 years. You know. But we know if we have a severe winter and we can get herbicide to the plants, we can do some serious damage. The next study, 15-16, control uncovered. Glyphosate diclot, just diclot. All right, uncovered. So the winter's acting on it. Covered, not so good. A little bit better, but we can do better. All right, 2015, 2016, 15 weeks. This is 15 weeks after treatment. These are all the herbicides that we ran through. If you can see, this is why we use what we use. Just straight diclot, just the contact. It's basically an acid-based herbicide. If we get the herbicide on the plant's going to be injured. It really doesn't matter. Diclot seems to work real well during the winter. That's why we've stuck with it for the last few winters. Keep in mind, winters, cold, high winds. There's not going to be a whole lot of days that we can actually get on the water and apply herbicides. But when we can, we're out there trying to get a little bit of help. If winter gives us help, we should get pretty good control. The next step was, okay, diclot works. We know that. All right, we're going to get a little control. It's going to buy us some time come spring, come summer. It's going to buy us a little bit of time. Okay, what about water bodies like Bistineau that are heavily forested? Bistineau, Saline. We have several water bodies in North Louisiana that are heavily covered with cypress, tupelo, all kinds of good stuff. We know what works. What can we do to get the herbicide to the plants that are being protected by trees? So we ran a few studies. We know these problems. You know, if you look in the back, pretty difficult to get a boat in there. Almost impossible. A lot of spots. Almost completely impossible to get there. So tried a few things. A lot of trees will drop their leaves, which kind of gives it the effect of the greenhouse effect. So what we looked at was diclot, glyphosate, diclot, flumioxazin, clipper, and obviously a control. We've got some cypress trees, 6 to 8 feet. You know, go down your local Lowe's, get some trees. Dr. Bradley Sartain, who's now with the Corp of Engineers in Vicksburg, he actually ran this study for his PhD to see, can we use the herbicides that we know have activity on Salvinia in the winter over trees? What's going to happen? Just let's give it a shot. Let's see what we can do. All right, here's Bradley. Here's the boom. It's kind of a small scale simulated. We would use a helicopter in this case. He's got his boom built. We have, the trees have dropped their leaves. December, February. He's got Salvinia in the mesocosm studies, the trash cans. He's got Salvinia with the trees. So apply those herbicides that we talked about earlier and see what happens, see how the trees react. Unfortunately, what we saw was erratic growth. And I guess the worst part of it was we know what works, diploid works the best in the winter through our first trial. And it affected the trees the worst. That doesn't look like a healthy tree. So once we ran through all the herbicides, all the trees, they didn't react real well. But we tried, we learned, there may be something out there in the future that doesn't affect trees like that. We know if we use a helicopter, we fly over trees, get the Salvinia on the ground, we're going to get trees. It's just part of it. You're gonna hurt some trees. So if new things come out, we'll put them through the same rigorous test and see what we get. But right now, it's something that we've kind of pumped the brakes on. You can't have acres and acres of trees out there that have bad growth like that. The next one is, this is actually kind of the funnest part of the job. Taking all the herbicides out there, or a lot of them, and putting them through screens. What works? What else is out there that can have activity on Giant Salvinia? We know most of them. So use 12 non-aquatic herbicides. These are herbicides that we couldn't spray on a lake, private pond. We couldn't spray it anywhere. We could do a mesocosm study. So we got 12 non-aquatic herbicides, put them through a test, just the regular mesocosm study at the lab, Dr. Mudge, and 2 worked really well. Metsulfuron methyl and sulfonylurea worked really well. Really good control, very impressive. Metsulfuron methyl, I'll talk about a little bit more. The second guy here, great on Giant Salvinia, really, really bad for fish. So in a fishery study, you kind of take that guy and you throw him out. But we stuck with MSM, metsulfuron methyl. A lot of people may have heard that, may have used it on grass or anything else that you may use it out there for. So we're going to go forward, metsulfuron methyl. Cool thing about this guy is the rates at which we can use it. If you look at these numbers right here, 0.065 ounces per acre. That's 1/16 of an ounce. But we did see activity. This is 1/8 of an ounce right here. Obviously a quarter, half, 1, 2, and 4. All of it, we saw activity with all of it. Just bear with me. Don't jump out of your seat just yet. And we also ran it through a gauntlet of tests with guys that we know work on Giant Salvinia. Did a short 8-week trial. This is the most fun.
Wow.
All right, here's the control. This is 1/16 of an ounce. Think of an ounce. Try to cut that into a 16th. That's not a lot of material, right? All right, this is an 1/8, quarter, and this is only 2 weeks. Now, this herbicide takes a while to work. It's not a contact. It's a systemic. It gets through the whole plant. It takes time. It takes a long time, actually. We'll see that in just a second. So the goal is 1 ounce per acre. If we could have a spray boat carry 20 ounces on, treat 20 acres a day, it'd be fantastic, right? And it's for turf, it's actually very, very good price. So this is what we see 8 weeks out, all right? This is the 16th. It did have some activity. It did kill a bunch of plants, but it did come back. But it's 16th of an ounce, man. That's not too shabby. 8th came back a little bit. Starting to see some real good activity now at a quarter, at a half. You get to 1 ounce, you get to 2 ounces or 4 ounces, it's just gone. Granted, this is a mesocosm study. This is a controlled study. This isn't in the field. Can't use it in the field yet. Hopefully, in the future, we will be. But 1 ounce per acre, getting that much activity, that's pretty good. That's pretty cool. All right, ignore this. Just ignore that guy. All right, plants did recover 1/16 of an ounce and 1/8 of an ounce. We got 94 to 100% control in a mesocosm study, not a field study. Not too shabby, right? The lethal dose is 90. Doesn't take much to kill 90% of the plants, but focus on that 1 ounce. That 1 ounce, we did get 100% control in the mesocosm study. So, we took the MSM, and ran it with a bunch of partners that we know work on Giant Salvinia. Everybody's familiar with Glyphosate, Roundup. We use that now, we use it a lot. Fluming, Clipper. I don't think, if you know Dr. Mudge has never done a study without Clipper in it. He loves Clipper. He did his PhD on Clipper and Giant Salvinia. He loves this guy, and it's a very, very good herbicide. Diquat, Arpinchazone, Glyphosate, Diquat, Glyphosate, Fluming. Just as references, stuff that we currently use. Did another 8-week study. At 2 weeks after treatment, here's our control, no herbicides, Glyphosate, Diquat, everything got some activity, right? Everything's starting to work on the plants. 8 weeks out, Glyphosate, Diquat, this is what we currently use. Got some kill, looking good. Glyphosate, Fluming, looking a little bit better. Metsulfuron by itself, done. Metsulfuron and glyphosate, done. Diquat, done. Fluming, done. Metsulfuron and Arpinchazone, done. So Metsulfuron, MSM60 seems to lend a helping hand in taking out Salvinia when combined with other herbicides that we know work on Salvinia. The results, it says it. These pictures say it right here. Picture that, that's what it says right here. Greater, equal to 98% Giant Salvinia control, Metsulfuron alone, and those combination treatments. So MSM works in combination with other guys too. We know that. It is slow, like you said, 2 weeks you can start to see it started working. 8 weeks, you really start to see some control. So it just takes a little longer, a little more patience is all. Current Metsulfuron research, Dr. Mudge has got a grad student, Will, who's supposed to come here tonight, but he's actually in class right now. He's doing a study with MSM, evaluating some more studies. He's looking at other things though. He's looking at other aquatic plants out there. What else does it work on? Cattails, duck potato, water lilies, bulrush. And then he's got kind of a little garden on the side that he waters and he takes care of it. But then he's going to hit it with Metsulfuron and see what happens. He's going to test our native irises. He's going to test vinca, which is periwinkle, just a common garden plant, to see how it reacts to Metsulfuron. Soybeans, tomatoes. How's it going to react to some of our common crops in South Louisiana, or all of Louisiana. Surfactant screening, the next step that Dr. Mudge is doing. Surfactants come out a lot. People produce a lot of surfactants. Right? New surfactants come out a lot. New aquatic herbicides really don't come out that much. I think in turf and forestry there's 260-something herbicides. In aquatics we have 50. So they don't come out too often. They take a lot of money, a lot of research. So new ones just don't pop up. But new surfactants do pop up. When they do, we run them through the gauntlet to see, hey, can we get better activity with our current glyphosate Diquat mix? See what else can work. Maybe you can shave a few dollars per acre off. In the long run, saving us hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we run through the gauntlet if they come out, just like we do every other surfactant. What we learned is there are a lot of surfactants out there that are effective with our current mixture. But right now we use Turbulence. It's a very good surfactant. It works with multiple herbicides. This was one we actually did just a few weeks ago in North Lake Charles. There was a pond that was 85–90% covered. Pitched this idea to Dr. Mudge. We used 2 contacts, Indithol and Fluming. And I actually handpicked 2 of our state spray crews that I knew would give me the best coverage. I wanted to see exactly what can these two in combination do. So we went in mid-April. I got in there and they didn't cover the whole thing. I didn't want them to hit any trees, so I had them, stay about 2-3 feet away from the bank. I didn't want to knock any trees back or hurt any trees. This is 1 week after treatment. I went back there every few weeks. I went 1 week. Dr. Mudge went the other week. We took pictures, shared ideas. We actually threw out, see this PVC right here. We actually threw out some squares just so we knew exactly what was in there. What kind of control did we get? 3 weeks out, some serious data going on. 4 weeks out, and at 8 weeks. We actually went back and cleaned it up. It's 100% clean now, but it's connected with the Calcasieu River, so it'll get reinfested next time. Maybe we try a different herbicide in the field. We know it works for mesocosms. Things like this give us an opportunity to get out in the field, try different ideas, different herbicides, different mixtures, different surfactants, to see what works, to see if we can get better, to see if we can improve, to see if we can save money in the long run. But be effective, if not more effective. And Dr. Mudge wanted me to thank basically everybody he works with. All the weed geeks, we get together. We have conferences a couple times a year. We share different ideas. He works at LSU Ag Center on Corp of Engineers, and we work. I probably talk to him every day, every other day, different bouncing different ideas off of him. See what he thinks. Hey, can we try this? Can we try that? With the mesocosm study, it's pretty neat because you can set something up in a couple days. Go get some plants from out. Right now, we're using the Teflon basin, putting everything in there. Henderson Lake, 35 minutes from the office. Put it in there, give something a go, see what it does, and then go from there. And that's just an experiment, which is kind of the funnest part of my job. Any questions? Right now, MSM is not approved for aquatics. We hope LDWF was the first step. They actually declined it. There is not enough data for fish toxicity. Unfortunately, it's out of our hands. It goes back to the manufacturer, the people that own Allocating is a company out of Alabama. So the ball is kind of in their court. We need more fish toxicity data. Are they going to do it? I don't know. They may sell the product to somebody else who will invest the money to look into it. And then after that, EPA, the national EPA. Everybody's kind of waiting on them. They're down to, I think, 20 days to make a decision on this on the herbicide. So we'll see. It's a fantastic herbicide. Very low use rate. Very expensive. No, that's the kick. For turf, things like that, it sells for about $8. So it's got a lot of potential. Will it ever be legalized? I hope so. I would like to combine it with whom I was talking about. If you ever meet Dr. Lewis, just talk to him. Her line. Lots of stuff. It's good stuff too. I would like to combine it with it. Use it as stuff because it'll work a lot faster than anything else. You can tell, okay, if we hit 95% of this, we just need to clean up over here.
That pond you showed that you cleared it up in, my question would be, would you take a fish you caught out of that and feed it to the kids?
Yeah. There's not a lot of restrictions on it. Now, it's connected to the Calcasieu River, so there's only rough fish in it right now. Buffalo, carp.
What's it gonna do to all the wildlife and all the fisheries? I mean, I guess you'd have to test that to make sure it doesn't kill everything.
Yes, ma'am.
You know,
Aquatic herbicides go through a very, very rigorous testing process. That's
So
why we
that's
have
what you do.
15.
right.
Forestry and agriculture and turf have 200 something. We have 15 ordinary.
I get it. Because
It's
it's
rigorous.
important. I mean, we want, We want that Salvinia gone, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you
Or even
know,
there.
we want to have a lake to fish on, to
Oh, yeah,
hunt
yeah,
on
sure.
and everything else.
Yeah, and that's why we, LDAF is asking for more toxicity rating,
Yeah,
you know?
great, I hope it works.
I mean,
Come to find something that kills the Salvinia and leaves the hydrilla and stuff alone for it.
MSM, I don't know if it has any activity in water, that I don't know.
Is the primary herbicide that they're spraying now on Bistineau and the other lakes just basically Roundup?
Glyphosate with diclot. Yes, sir?
I got a lot of alligator weed from a place up between Port of Bistineau and Russian Creek, and there's so much alligator weed in there this year, and it hadn't been that way the last few years, but it's attracted the Sylvania, so the Sylvania's not moving with the wind and the current like it used to. So right now, from my seawall out to the main lake, which is probably over 100 yards, it looks like you can walk because it's a solid sheet of alligator weed in Sylvania, and nothing's killing it. I guess y'all ain't spraying any this year, but I mean, I can't even fish out in front of my dock all the way out to the main lake. There's no place to put a bait in it. Is there anything done about that?
Well, alligator weed on the lake is a problem, and fortunately, most of the herbicides that we're using during the summertime work on both to some extent. And we do, I don't know for sure, they're making a lead. We got some crews that are working on the lake currently, I'll get into that in a minute, and they were very near your house working, spraying yesterday. So I don't know if they got that far or not. They were just to the south of you.
Hey, Jeff, can I say something? I had in front of my place and several of my neighbors, when the water was down, it's a solid mat of alligator weed. My neighbor went and talked to Red River Specialty, I believe is who it is, a chemical company. Got some stuff called arsenal.
That's my favorite.
And can I tell you something? This year, we don't have any alligator weed.
One treatment will get you for the year.
None.
Wow.
We don't have any. And Cody,
It's a good one.
my next door
They don't give it
neighbor,
away, but it's
he
good.
didn't spray it.
Is it approved
He used some other stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it? It's called Arsenal?
I've seen
Massive is the
Oh.
actual herbicide. Arsenal's the
Is
brand.
Oh.
Is there different strands of Salvinia? In other words, are the Salvinia you're studying on Bistineau, is the plant the same as the Salvinia on Caddo Lake or down south? Is the plant different itself that you're treating? In other words, you're studying these chemicals on these plants down south. Now, is this Salvinia we have up here a different strand of Salvinia?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. As far as I know, there's one strain. I don't know of any genetic testing on Salvinia whatsoever. I had never heard of a study on
We have
genetics.
common and giant in Louisiana, but everything we talked about tonight is giant Salvinia. Now, whether, like he's talking about, I don't know the genetics on it, but we're calling it all giant Salvinia. It looks the same under a microscope.
It's all the same species. There could be subspecies, but I've never heard anything to the contrary of one single species.
Theoretically, it shouldn't be very different because essentially the plant clones itself. It doesn't really have sexual reproduction, so they should be all very, very similar. There's been, I think, some limited work in genetics on it 10 years ago or so, maybe. I'm not sure if that was conclusive or not.
Well, are you okay with us spraying it over our own houses, what you call arsenal?
I sprayed arsenal. The only thing that they told us.
Did you follow the label?
Yes.
The label is the law.
And be careful around trees.
With arsenal, be very careful around everything.
Everything. 'Cause if you get it around up underneath the drip line of the trees and stuff, it will kill the tree.
Yeah, if you go out and buy
irrigating,
Yes.
spraying, pulling water from near you,
Right.
that is of a concern with it. So it is something, if you were strictly treating alligator weed, that is one of the herbicides, that's our primary goal. Now, it doesn't necessarily respond as well on Salvinia as some of our other.
It doesn't work at all.
It has
But it works in everything else.
irrigation restrictions, and it's costly and things like that, so on a large scale, but if it's just, that's what I got in my pond at the house or something, that's the product.
That's what I use in my house.
But like what I said, I sprayed it when there was no water. In other words, the water was down, it was just mats of it.
And you probably have better control like that.
Totally eliminated. I have none.
It's a great one.
Zero.
Be careful though.
Yeah.
Use it in aquatic, it's improved in aquatics. So use it in the water. Don't use it around your house. Don't use it around trees. Try not to use it before it rains. If you use it around in your yard and it rains, you will literally be able to follow exactly where that imazicure moved through your yard.
So you can't spray a lot of stuff right now on the lake stuff, and it's so thick around my house right now, it would kill it.
As long as you stay on the label. Yes, sir. It's legal.
It's terrible down like that. I can't fish this year. I can't not get a hook anymore.
That's so sad.
It's that good.
When they drain or you dry out there?
I mow it. I mean, not just
That was me for the last 4 years.
And we've had some folks before have success in areas where they disturb the soil there, you know, the seed base is there and not come back as strong as next year when the lake's down. So that's certainly something to do. An alligator weed, you know, is a problem. It's invasive also. Certainly it tends to stay in shallow areas. It's not near the plant that Salvinia is. But we have problems with it on the lake coming on before Salvinia did. And so, you know, it's there. Maybe it's not the same class as Salvinia.
right now, for 4 miles over the professional creek and little patch, it's soft.
Well, that order killed them cucumber
It's come up with some years we have it much earlier.
Cucumbers, they don't
And some
grow
years,
in
depending on when the water comes up,
They
it
just
may
grow in the
not
water.
be very bad.
I know it.
Just stay on the label.
Stay
Follow the law. Follow the law.
I have a little dog runs everywhere in them cucumber. If it comes back, he's got layers of cucumber.
That's so sad to have to get it out too. We have to get them out.
Oh, yeah, he spent 3 hours getting them shears.
Watch your sheep, then you want to worry about them.
Let me run through this real quick so we can, and then we'll have a time of question and answer, because I know everybody's got things to work through, and we'll just kind of show you a little bit. You know, the lake right now, all these things are kind of a matter of perspective at that point. These mesocosm studies and all that are there, and then when you make it up to a bigger scale, is that success? What is success? And it's all in the eyes of a beholder at some point in time. So, as I've said many times in this, wish we had the silver bullet, the magic wand. If I had it, we'd use it. I mean, that's the answer. And we just had some meetings, you know, with our counterparts in surrounding states, Arkansas, Mississippi, and they're starting to get some of this and sharing the same war stories. And it's not like there's an answer out there, but as the information presented tonight, we're working on that. We're trying to still find things that show promise or that show us something different. So, just to give you a brief update where we're at on the lake, you know, as far as Salvinia goes this year, and like I said, everything's kind of relative. It's been a good year for Salvinia, but everything with Salvinia is coming. It likes that hot weather. You know, maybe too hot for weevils to make it under open sunlight, but guess what likes that warm water? Our little friend, unfortunately. So just to give you an idea, this is very brief. This is one of our estimates that we did in January. And now, this is something I show in all these meetings that says 17 acres. That is not 17 acres all pushed in one place. We fly the lake at the same elevation out, you know, every time to have a consistent methodology so that these things are comparable from year to year, from month to month. That is matted Salvinia that can be seen from the air. It's the only way we can have something consistent, because you can go on the lake and it's scattered. How do you quantify that? It's moving, it's there, so you try and get this snapshot as quick as you can of the whole lake to get some form of an estimate. So keep in mind, 17 acres is not literal 17 acres. You could find Salvinia plants in the headwaters of the dam at this time. They're small. To the common observer, you may not notice them, but they're all around the lake. So that's real good results coming out of the winter. And we had a very mild winter, all things considered. So it's not necessarily like we got this great help from Mother Nature that we've seen some other years, like what Dr. Diaz was presenting and stuff. So that's encouraging. But this plant, success is short-lived. So we looked again in early April, which is what we typically do when green up occurs and the plants start moving. You know, we've had some efforts in there between, some continued high water events and things that not only you get a flush, but you get a miniature drawdown and stuff floats up on the side and falls. So we dropped a little bit. We were 12 acres estimated there in early April. That's good for this lake, the way it grows Salvinia, that's great. But as the weather warms, this plant comes on. It's the same story every year. We know this. So We just did a survey flight last week, a week ago today, and we're at 474 estimated acres. Now, as you can see now, you know, the top end of the lake is pretty good from all the flow we've had. The middle part of the lake is where the concentrations are the most right now of Salvinia, but we also have lots of it on the southern end in the wooded areas and things like that. So keep in mind, you know, these big open water places, that's the habitat on the lake that is least suitable to Salvinia. So that's the last place Salvinia is going to impact. So well, that's 474, that's bad. That's bad, but it's good, relative speaking. So to compare it from year to year, sorry, I got to step back a minute. That's really bright. That's close to it. So this is kind of just a graph of, we have real consistent acreage estimates from 2014 to present. And so just to give you a baseline here, what we've been looking at some years in the winter, you know, last year we were really low after that significant freeze events we had. But even at that low, you see it starts coming back. And so, you know, by mid-July again, we were up near that 1,500 acre mark. And somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 acres, when it hits that, that's the part where it's going to take off and we're going to have severe impacts and probably affect the next year, you know. So we'd like to keep that plant somewhere below 2,000 acres if possible. That's kind of our deal. So, you know, if you just kind of look on track, we're at 474 right now. It's a little higher than we were last year. It's lower than some years in the past, and you can kind of look at where we've been by that mid-July. Where we'll be at this year, that's the question mark. We're not really sure. But in conjunction with that, and we're attempting to stave that off. That's what we do. We manage, or attempt to manage, control the plant. We're not trying to eradicate it. We're not at that level. The problem is too big for that. But we are currently have a 100-day spray contract that's working on the lake with about 4 boats on the lake this week. Where's Canes over here? Lost everybody in the dark. So we should be treating about 1,800 acres in the next few weeks or so on that. That's a big spray effort, and just kind of to show you, you know, this is kind of what we have spent or what we are spending currently for this year so far on the lake. So we're continuing to be committed to Bistineau, trying to work through things, but you know, we don't have the perfect tool. We don't have that, so we're talking about managing it. And that integrated approach that Dr. Diaz alluded to, we've talked about that before, that is weevils or biological controls, and hopefully we can get a new strain in that we can get some success with, or attempt to test these herbicides and developing that, and it is certainly mechanical controls and a drawdown has been our most effective tool. It's staving off Salvinia from totally taking this lake, you know, and that's kind of where we're at on it. So that's really all I've got to present to you at this point, just kind of showing you where we're at. So get the lights back on, please.
Are you looking at a drawdown?
We suspect it, certainly we will. In the past indicates that the drawdown on this lake is probably needed every year, you know. And so what we're looking at right now is we're saying that a late July drawdown is most likely, and we don't have a specific date at the moment, but we're going to try and get as much public notice as we can with that. So sometime in there, based on that, based on past track record, that's what our indication would be at this point. Yes, ma'am.
What's the trigger point on acreage for drawdown?
Ma'am?
What is the trigger point?
Well, we don't necessarily have it. We had a trigger point in past years, at 1,500 acres, and that's where we've learned, and that's where that comes in about that middle. So we're not necessarily looking at it that way. We're trying to utilize and look at it and try and get as much recreational use or whatever we can out of it. But the reality of it is it's somewhere in there is when it hits that mark, and 2016 is a pretty good reminder to us, and other years where we've gone. The later we go without initiating that, the plant just kicks it in another gear and it grows. And so then we have so much more on the lake to deal with the next year. And it ultimately, in several cases, has forced us to then react and pull a drawdown much earlier, May 1st, prior to July 4th. And so we want to get past that 4th of July time so that everybody can enjoy the lake for that. That's something we think we reasonably can get, but I'm not sure how much further we can get past that without the situation, you know, just degrading to where it affects the next year. So,
You got a huge buoy line right now in Clark. Now you look around the fence market, all right? You can't use those lines to block that stuff off, spray it on a trap, turn it back loose, block it again, expecting it to not drop door cheek up on it. When it comes down to the door cheek, I can sit on my dock and the whole lake's covered for days. They trap that, spray it, kill it, and then turn it loose.
Well, that sounds really good on that, and in reality, that just doesn't quite work out that way. You trap it, spray it, like Daniel's showing these things, it takes weeks for it to do it, and it all mixes up, and it does. It's really hard to trap it, especially if it's in a big amount of it, it's pushing, it's a lot of weight there. You know, that boom there is, we sprayed cane a little bit on it. I mean, it catches, it looks impressive. It's kind of like the other day on it, it's covered, and when you're standing there looking at it, you go, wow. Well, when you actually plot out how much space it is, it's less than an acre of plants, and when you got 474 acres, it's 2% of the lake.
Well, that's all that Sylvania out of the woods on the other side of the lake, and they cover that lake from port to River Creek, and the whole lake within a layer over it. I mean, it gradually floated out with the current and wind, from the wind come out south and move back toward Fort Chew. But like I said, it seemed like you could use the wind and trap that stuff, somehow spray it. I didn't know if that's what we used in buoy lines to far back.
It's an attempt at some of that same type of stuff. We've used them a lot over the years, and in various methods, and they've not. We haven't been able to quantify it, making the difference in the long-term success or in staving off things. So, you know, if you trap it too long, you're writing off some other place. If you trap it temporary and spray it, well, you can spray it where it is, and boom's expensive, and it's not labor intensive, and it takes a lot of time to put it in and out. And when you could just be applying the herbicide and doing, when it's all going to move off of it, it's also very hard to keep it there without totally encircling it. You know, and doing that, and how long do you leave that for rot? There are factors to it, but it's kind of like what I talked about on the lab study and things like that. The bigger the problem is, the harder all those things are to do it over such a large area. You know, if I put back up this, and you talk about all the places on the lake that harbor Salvinia, you may want to cut that light off for just a minute. Yeah, this is prime habitat on this part, but there are places all around that are suitable for it. And as you all know, that live on the lake, given which direction the wind's going, as to how severe it is in one place or the other. And so there are plenty of places down here that it's growing from, and it's growing at an alarming rate. And I literally mean an alarming rate. You know, this plant, we've measured it on the lake, doubling in coverage in 2 or 4 days. I mean, you almost can't believe that something can grow that fast. And so, even, you know, the conversation always about the gravel pits. When you look at the pits right now, that's full of big, mature tertiary plants. They're yellowish brown colored stuff. The stuff on the lake is all brand new growth. You know, this stuff's growing all over the lake. It's not necessarily coming from anywhere. It is growing everywhere it is at. And so Ronnie uses the term connect the dots. And as the summer goes on, all these little patches continue to grow, and those dots get bigger and bigger until they're touching, until they're doing it. So, you know, that kind of illustration of you know, why you circle this up here. This is, yeah, you can control Salvinia on a lake where you can get to all of it, or where it's not very big, and you can apply more herbicides than the plant outgrows you. But the size of Bistineau is really just one of the factors that makes it so complicated on this lake. Yes, we can turn the light back on, please, because I'm struggling to see who we got.
Just, you know, when I look at that map, I'm just kind of watching every year it develops up there. And you talk about the booms and going back to that. If you pick that spot on the lake that's right there around Diamond T, State Park number 2, it's a real narrow part of the lake. And one thing, you know, Salvinia won't travel over the land. And it's you know, a real narrow part of the lake. You come all the way across it from time to time. The last couple of weeks, we had a serious north wind that blew for several days. There's no doubt that it traveled down, you know, mid-lake. It just been a golden opportunity to trap it up there. It could have contained the area so the spray guys came in. By the way, the spray guys, it was the crew from New Iberia, I think it was, Brush. Master, yeah, the current contractor. I thought those guys were really good. I just happened to stumble on them and watch them spray. I thought they did a good job, had the right equipment. But if you contained it up there, you know, and be much more strategic on the spraying, you whack it and then remove the boom, and then the wind's probably going to turn back around from the south. You might give the people up in the north part of the lake a chance to, you know, enjoy more of the season than probably did. Just a suggestion.
Well, it's certainly something we've considered, but it's not that you spray it and poof, it's gone. It's still there, it's more growing. If we had 100% coverage, we could make it look like Daniel's garbage cans, and that would become that's a more reasonable approach. I mean, Kane, would you like to, your ramrod nose crew, like to address anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, we typically, strategically spray in the areas where the wind is banking it. Some of those same situations are naturally happening throughout the lake, and those are a much larger scale than, say, a boom we could do with manpower moving those things around. So we, throughout the years of doing this on the lake, we've come to find these areas where it's congregating at this wind, in this situation, and these guys are in tune with that, and so they can move and treat and be much more productive by simply utilizing what is already going on the lake rather than trying to manipulate the Salvinia into a situation that's more conducive to spray. We simply go to another area. I mean, like Jeff said, even if it's in the trees in one spot, well, that's blowing it out of the trees on another spot. We're going to move to those areas. And the upper end of the lake, I mean, truthfully, this time, since the two major floods we've had, has been in much better condition than past years. Typically, this time of the year, that end of the lake would already be, it'd be done. So, I mean, truthfully, that end of the lake is much better this year than it has been in the past.
I just think you got a bottleneck on a funnel right there in that part of the lake. You can trap it.
Yeah, and that's actually, we've had a boom there before and attempted that strategy, and it was deemed less effective than our current control measures.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you know, and everybody else knows, that the upper end of the lake is the most trees. You can't spray those around in there. If the boom is applied anywhere, it's got to be applied to where you can get in open water. We don't want it trapped up on our end of the lake, so where you can't get around on that end of the lake, just so they can use the south end of the lake stick.
It just falls under the category that if it, through our experience, if that became the option and it wasn't effective, then we would consider it. But like I said, like Danny talked about, we've done it before, and on the grand scheme, it just doesn't help us. It doesn't eliminate it. You got Salvinia at that point. You had Salvinia a few weeks ago. As soon as the southerly winds started, we were marching north into the hay meadow. So where is that at? Depends on which day it is and things like that. So let's say I got ma'am and then.
Would it help if on your website people could record, like take a picture of the Salvinia in the area and coordinate it with the spray crews?
You can submit that. It's on our website for a special page for this. Yes.
I'm just curious of what's the long-term effect of all this biomatter falling to the bottom of the lake. It produces so fast, we kill it no matter if it's weevils or chemicals. What's going to happen, 20 years from now?
Well, that's certainly a significant factor in it, and that's one of the reasons too for drawdowns. You're exposing that, and when you expose it to air, rotting can occur. You're getting rid of that material. Now, that being said, slough beds that don't need water, they're filling in, and that's going to happen whether it's natural, just left there. It's going to create layers and dye and fall to the bottom, whether you're applying herbicides, whether the weevils are added. If those places can't get there with that kind of biomass that is produced every single year, certainly you're going to have a buildup of it, and that is another positive aspect of drawdowns. Drawdowns, we've talked about that at length in these meetings before. They're multifaceted for it. Control Salvinia doesn't eliminate it, it doesn't do, but without it, the conditions would be far worse. It benefits the overall habitat, it stimulates fish growth, it helps us on a number of factors. It creates a fishing opportunity in late summer and when conditions on the lake without that probably have very few people using the lake when it's
covered in Salvinia. So it has a lot of positives to it. Does it have negatives? Certainly does. And it doesn't come without recognizing that it's impeding and for you to live on the lake and stuff, you can't get access to it from your home, you know. But it's the choice that we have at the present time to prevent the whole lake, excuse me, from being unused, you know. And so we want to use those. We want to use them at smart times so that we can decompose things, so that we can promote healthy fisheries, so that we can do all that. So that's certainly an aspect of it. Mr. Strange, you agree?
Yeah, just so I can be absolutely clear, more booms and more manpower wouldn't help the.
It would have to be at such a level that it's just not economically feasible to do so without. We can't avoid a drawdown necessarily through those avenues. They're just not efficient enough to us. Now, you could increase it, and we spent a lot on Lake Bistineau. And if you look at our spray efforts over time and the years that are really high, it hasn't really, when that plant starts growing and you analyze it, the effects of our herbicide efforts become diminished. Because the plant, you just can't be in enough places at a time. We've had 10 boats working on the lake, we've had things, and so, yes, but it's the point of diminishing returns. The more you put, you can have everything with this plant is a very short-lived, result. You can kill it, but it grows so fast that it's growing over here, and it becomes very difficult to see the impacts again. So you can spend more, but when we start doing that, we get into millions of dollars each year, and something that quite frankly just doesn't exist currently, or the current financial stage, or maybe ever. I don't know. But
Well, I understand what you're saying. Once the Salvinia gets down on the south end of the lake, it continues to grow and all that. But you can look at the map and tell the big battle is up on the north end of the lake there, and
well, it's actually the middle of the lake right now. The north end's fairly open. There's a lot of lake above that. There's 1,500, 2,000 acres above where most of it is right now.
Looks like about up the third to me.
Well, and that's just it. It's on the lower part too. So it's not, again, it's not coming from there. If you go down there and go in behind Peggy's Island or somewhere right now and go look at that fringe that's along the bank, and then go back and look at it a week later or 2 weeks later, you'll see what we're talking about. That's not, it's not floating in there. It's expanding from that. So I'm telling you all the time, you can be in awe of this plant when you get messing with it. So.
Just bring it up, just a few suggestions.
I was just wondering, I know it takes more than one layer of spray to kill it, because it's like it's hard for us to comprehend, but I'm hopeful about what we saw, because obviously they sprayed it once and then it killed it. But with what you're currently using, how many times do you have to spray? What's contained in a boom for it to die before you can even move that boom somewhere else if you chose to?
Be multiple times on that. I mean, if you look at that, if you look at what you get, what was the efficiency? 98%. I mean, it's kind of like how many weevils per acre deal. Right. It's a lot on the weevils per acre. We don't really start to see mortality in the plants until about 100 weevils per kilo, which is
we never get there
of that. Probably not, I don't think. And the same deal on that. So if you had it in a pond situation, if you had it contained, it's certainly going to take one application. You're going to reduce it. Let's just say 50 to 60%. The second one may knock it back. We've done some work like that again in small plots. But unless you're able to come back and redo it again, it's going to what little bit is left turns right back around and fills in the space. And so you're not. That boom would probably have to be in place for a significant amount of time, weeks, to kill and allow all that to rot, because this few little pieces turn back loose and lives out in it. 2 days later, there's 2 more plants and it's 4, and so that it.
So hence the drawdown.
Right, and the drawdown has all its positive effects, and it affects large areas. I mean, you essentially dry out 9,000 acres of the lake at one time, and it doesn't cost, it's a very cheap control method. It's not cheap to y'all that live on the lake. I don't mean to make that sound light like it, but it doesn't cost millions of dollars. It doesn't, and it's effective. And it stops the growth cycle before it hits that accelerated rate. It is the best tool we have in our arsenal currently.
And Jeff, last year, the DOTD asked y'all to close the gates early because of some erosion problems. And have we talked to them anymore? And we've had these flood things. Are we still in trouble with the dam?
David,
Go ahead.
Yeah, we haven't done anything to the dam yet. It's still, every time we open the gates, there's a cost to that dam. Because it increases the erosion at the bottom face of the dam. So that's another thing that wildlife figures is having a balance too.
Are we going to get to a point where we can't open the dam?
I don't know that. I don't know the answer to that.
We need to get Debbie involved. Debbie, is there any money in Baton Rouge? Has anybody started asking for it? We can start asking tonight.
This is not a flood control situation. I mean, that's not what that's for. We know the dam is not for flood control. You know, Gene, when he was a representative, he was working on putting a flood control measure in the mid part of the lake, other end. But it's something that, you know, Secretary Montoucet, I'm sure, could work with the current administration, see what kind of funds would be available, and if it would be grant money. I'm not sure, but he's got the experts with him, and I'd support it, of course. You know,
If we can't draw it down, we're going to be in a big problem.
But that's not a flood control gate, and I think a lot of us get confused on that. You know.
Salvinia control gate.
As David alluded to, back the dam inspection this morning that's going on, checking on it. We'll have a report on some of that stuff in the future on it. But, and it's, the problem exists not just literally at the dam, it's miles downstream where erosion starts. And so it's a big problem. We've had lots of discussions have been going on since the 80s regarding this issue, and funding has always been the limiting factor. It's not a simple fix. It's not a go in there and throw some rocks in and that problem solved. You know, that was some band-aid work. You know,
we already massive amount of rock in it. And it helped. Don't get me wrong, it helped.
Spray flooding, make it worse.
That's right.
You did.
The velocity of the water coming out the gate, and the gate is such that it continues to make turbulence there. It aggravates what you call head cut. And that's turbulent water just like eats. Yeah, it does. When it swirls around in there, it starts to, we've got stone in there, but it works on it. It is relentless. Acts every time, just like gravity.
There was talk about doing something to be able to draw the lake down even further.
Yes, sir. Jeff, y'all got anything going
Well,
on?
that's certainly, to draw the lake down further has been discussed, but where that cuts in is if you're talking about it for Salvinia control, you're losing the lake, but you're not gaining anything on Salvinia control. Like when you look at last year when we were down to that 1 or 2 acres from a winter, but yet we're still by summer over there. You know, if we draw the lake down to the creek channel, we're still going to have that 1 or 2 acres worth of it from spring.
You have a lot more dry land.
Right, but you've lost all access to it and all that recreation that occurs in the late summer and through the fall, and you've decimated the fishery through that. You pull it down that low, you're going to eliminate the fish population essentially, and then because Salvinia is so rampant, we're not going to be able to leave the water full in the lake long enough for the lake to naturally recover. You're going to have to be doing dewatering it again the next year, and so you're not, after seeing wintertime effects several times throughout the course of this, that was an idea early on, but after seeing how low it gets from those severe winters and how quickly it rebounds, that's kind of off the table. We don't think that's going to, we think we lose way more than we gain.
And you have to completely rebuild all the gates to do that anyway.
Well, you'd have to move, you're not going to, you have to, it's a very complicated, and Robert up there also can tell you, we've called and bounced ideas off each other for this, but I mean, it's not so simple as just that, and it's not as simple as a scorpion or a siphon pipe when you're dealing with
with 17,000 acres and a billion acres of land draining into it. And oh, by the way, the complication is downstream of it, it's another 600,000 acres that gets right below that. It comes in Flat River, so, and the red, so it's, you know, it's very complicated. So, Secretary Montoucet, you can, yeah, let me get out of your way.
I think at the end of the day, it's a multiple, it's like a menu. We're trying to use to address the issues that we have. You're unique in certain ways, but when you look at the big picture, you're not unique because you're not the only thing that has salvation. I committed from the day I took this office that Bistineau was going to be my blueprint. And I commit to you tonight that blueprint is going to continue to move forward until hopefully we can find some kind of solution. It's going to take time. We're going to have to bear with each other. You know, you're going to have to bear the lowering of the lake and less usage on your part. But we're going to do everything we can, and our staff has done that, to work with y'all and take suggestions and listen to people talk about boom. And that sounds really good, and until I went and try to put some boom out and solve what effort it takes, number one, to get it out, and what effort it takes to move it, number two, and what was the actual effects of that, you know, in the overall scheme of things. So it may a lot of things sound really good, but the practical application on a 17,000 acre lake with a 1 million acre feed trough that goes into it is something that's, you know, I don't think a lot of people can visualize that and understand all of that water coming with it. But we're going to continue moving forward. We're going to continue, and hopefully one day we can come up with a weevil that we can put out there that we don't have to keep replacing every year. You know, we don't have to worry about the cool weather killing it. And that's going to help us to some degree control. But that's not the whole answer either, because the uniqueness of your lake, you know, that, I guess that's why your lake is so pretty. It's different from everything else. But with being different, we all know what that means. Okay? There's a lot of things we got to live with that we may not like. But we're going to continue working and doing the things we can to make your lake as useful to you as long as we possibly can each and every summer. You know, and we appreciate y'all help, and certainly appreciate y'all coming here because of and showing the interest that y'all have. When I first started, I didn't recognize two people, and you never do that as a secretary, especially people that vote on your budget. Dodie Harden and past State Representative Gene Reynolds. In fact, I'm spending the night at Gene's house tonight, so okay, so that's all like this, I like to come up with and we'll probably do a little frogging tonight. But we're going to continue moving forward. We're going to continue looking at new things. We're going to continue doing things maybe a little bit different, and you'll see us out there. You know, I think last year was the big talk about booms, or the year before we weren't using enough booms. So we tried. We listened. We put some out. We did some things. That stuff's expensive, guys. You know, it's just like that straight. It's really expensive. I'm taking money from other areas because I made the commitment to Bistineau, and we'll continue to do that. But make no mistake, dealing with Salvinia is an expensive proposition. We spent $8 million last year. And guess what? We've got the same amount of Salvinia this year as we did last year. So I took $8 million out of my conservation fund. Okay? And we're running in a deficit. And we're going to not have any money in our conservation fund come the year 2023 if we continue doing that and we don't have a revenue source to replace that. This is almost a losing battle. We're throwing a lot of good money after, I want to say bad, but you know what? If it gives you use of that lake for 60 days or 90 days, then it's not as bad as it looks, okay? Because you are getting some use out of it. We certainly want to provide that ability for you to do that. So without, you know, we got tough times ahead, not only with Salvinia. We're going to have some other issues come up shortly. Agent Corps and no one. We deal with species, that invasive species all the time. And Salvinia is not the only one. You know, we have that all over the state. In South Louisiana, in the marshes, we've got a bug that's killing all of the marshlands. That's going to cause serious erosion problem. That's just one, and we've just started doing that. And it's spreading almost as bad as Salvinia. So, you know, I go to bed at night and I have these nightmares about what's next. You know, what's coming next? What's going to hit us? But we're going to certainly do everything we can. Our staff here has been open to everybody's suggestions. You know, and this is even more important. I think last year, last year we got the people to get involved in us, and we moved some weevils from one place into Bistineau, and a lot of people took a part in that. You know, when we're going to find that secret bug, we all going to have to step up to help us to get them out there, because we only got so many people, and so you know we'll be calling on y'all to get involved. The good news is that y'all are involved. You're here tonight. You care about the lake, and we're going to continue moving forward to see what we can do. I need that blueprint as bad as you need a clean lake, because I've got another 100 lakes I got to deal with the same problem. Thank y'all so much for coming. Appreciate that.